Good evening. Good evening. There we go. Yeah, I like to. That's my call and response. My name is Cleve Quinter. I'm the manager of author and speaker engagement at the Pratt. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. This is our last program for the summer. And you would say, but it's only halfway through, and we are aware of that. We'll be dark in August, but we will be back in September and October. So if this is your first time here, please go to our website and you can see all the programs we have coming up, or you can talk to my friend and my colleague Sophia back there, or Sean. We can tell you all about what we got coming up this fall. We host over 90 programs a year, so I guarantee there's something else here for you, but not tonight. Tonight we're here to talk about Crack the Sky. So I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I do have an introduction, but first, some housekeeping. Tyson's going to speak for 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for your questions. We're here in the Poe room. It's intimate. If you have a question, just raise your hand. Tyson will call on you. Tyson, if you wouldn't mind just repeating the question. We do have folks who are watching online. We have people on our YouTube and Facebook page. So again, if you can't make it out to a Pratt program, author program, we stream 90% of our programs on our Facebook and YouTube page. So you can check it out there. Okay, so before my introduction, I would like to start by saying that I moved to Baltimore 15 years ago. I live in Hamden. And when I moved there 15 years ago, I met my neighbor Clarence. And there's Clarence. And he welcomed me to the neighborhood. He had lived his whole life in Hamden, or most of his life in Hamden, Pimlico and then Hamden, he told me. And I was like, what's that shirt? What does that mean? Is that a band? And he was so upset with me. I really felt like we were cool, and then we were not cool after that. And then we were family after that, and not much later, and Clarence just passed about 6 months ago. He was one of my very close friends, and I miss him dearly. And his wife Marlene is watching tonight because she's also a big fan of Crack the Sky. So I wanted to make it just a very quick say hello to Marlene and Clarence, who, if he was here right now, oh my God, he would dominate the conversation. It would be a lot of personal anecdotes about Crack the Sky. And so anyway, with that said, now I need my glasses. Tonight, I'm happy to welcome Tyson Koska to the Pratt Library to discuss his biography of Crack the Sky, All Things Crack, Some Endure. In 1979, an unknown band from Weirton, West Virginia, shocked the Baltimore music scene, becoming the Beatles of Baltimore. Rolling Stone crowned their first album one of the year's most impressive debuts, and in 2015 listed it as one of the 50 best prog albums of all time. You can look that up, that is true. Yet, Baltimore's Beatles are nearly unknown everywhere else, even as 50 years later, they continue to create new music and sell out shows in their adoptive home. How does an out-of-town band hit it so big in one locale and remain a staple for half a century? All Things Crack explores the band's odd history through the voices of the original and subsequent members. Based on hundreds of interviews, the story unfolds as a 50-year conversation interspersed with lyrics and melody. Tyson Koska has taught in both the philosophy and computer science departments at Towson University, specializing in the three-way intersection of business, technology, and strategy. His courses in generative AI and software engineering are grounded in real-world experience, helping humans extract value from machines and designing machines that freely offer their value. It is my great pleasure to welcome Tyson Koska to the Pratt Library.
That was super nice. Thank you. I wish Clarence could be here. I have a few music clips that I'm going to play throughout this little chat. I had to get that set up. I'm going to just test the volume here real quick. That's perfect. All right. So thank you. Thank you for coming to this. talk about my book, All Things Crack, Some Endure. I thought that what I would do, I never do the same kind of talk twice. And so I was thinking about how I was going to approach this conversation about the band. And normally what I do is I take a few key stories from their past and I mix in a little personal anecdote and just sort of hop around through different stories that are important, that overlap with my experience with the band and the band's history. And I was ruminating on which particular stories to tell, and it dawned on me that the overarching conundrum of Crack the Sky is they were so close so many times. They've been up and down and up and down and up and down. And you can imagine in 50 years, there's time for a lot of ups and downs. But I would say for most bands, there's major ups and major downs, and then there's no more band. This band is still playing. It was 1975 when that first album came out. But they formed in 1973-ish. The number of ups and downs, when I came up, I'm just going to do an up and down thing. I'm going to say, this was up, and then this was down, then this was up. So I got up and I thought, I'm just going to jot down a few of the major ups and downs. And then 3 minutes later, this list of just roller coaster, the sine wave of their existence. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to talk about these highs and lows, some bigger than others, but all of them very distinct and humorous in a very dark kind of way sometimes. So the band is from Weirton, West Virginia. They're not a Baltimore band. I didn't know that for many years. A lot of people to this day do not know they're not a Baltimore band, that this band is from Weirton, West Virginia, which is in the panhandle of West Virginia, about 30 miles to the west of Pittsburgh. So if they had a real home, it would be Pittsburgh. And the Pittsburgh Library actually bought a couple of the books, so that was nice. But their home, for all intents and purposes, is Baltimore. And how this band got started, so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the first high that is really identifiable. And this comes from, so the main thread, the main songwriter of Crack the Sky is a guy named John Palumbo. In fact, many people identify John Palumbo as being Crack the Sky, but the story does go, like all things, is more complicated and goes far beyond just John Palumbo. But we're going to pick up with John Palumbo. John Palumbo, when he went away to college, Marshall University, and he got, I think, into his sophomore or junior year, and he didn't feel like he fit in. He wasn't happy. He was a psychology major, and he decided he just wanted to take a break, and he hitchhiked across the United States for almost a year. And the thing about John Palumbo is he's very opinionated, he's very smart, he's very creative, and he enjoys his privacy. He's not a real personable kind of person. He's much more personable now, but even now, he's the one quiet guy at dinner, or he's not going to come strike up a conversation with you very often. And so being on the road was difficult for him because you're expected to socialize with the people that you're hitchhiking with, and he just found it very, very, very difficult. So he comes back from the road. He's back in Weirton, West Virginia, and he's never played an instrument before, but he's in a pawn shop and he sees a guitar, and he thinks, well, maybe I'll pick up a guitar. So he brings an acoustic guitar home. The other thing about John Palumbo is he doesn't have perfect pitch, but he has something close to it. He can take an instrument, piano, guitar, what have you, and he can teach himself to play it in short order, and he can also invent with it and play it well and come up with new things. So he bought this acoustic guitar, and he said he wasn't very good, so he started making up his own songs. And he was in a music store in Weirton, and Rick Wachowski, who is the second, how should I say, the second most important or most influential member of Crack the Sky, was working at this record store or music store, and John Palumbo was playing something, and Rick came over and said, "Oh, you know, are you from Weirton?" And he said, "Yeah, I just moved back to the area." And Rick said he looked so weird. He said he had a big trench coat and big afro haircut and just didn't look like anybody around. This is 1972-ish, and 72, 73. And he said, "Yeah, I've been hitchhiking around and I'm just back in the area." And he said, "Oh, you're into music?" And they just got to talking about it, and John mentioned that he wrote songs, and Rick was in bands in Weirton and had never met anyone that wrote songs before, and said, "Oh, I'd love to hear." So John played him a couple of songs, and Rick was like, "Yeah, I love this music." And John said, it's in the book somewhere, John said that the high that he got by finding someone that was interested in his music and wanted to play his music was bigger high that he got getting the record deal and recording the first album and all of this other stuff. And, you know, and that goes to show how, you know, how fragile the artist's ego is, that was a real high point for him to have someone that wanted to do his song. So there's a nice high point. But then they got into a band. Now, they didn't start playing original songs right away. They played cover music, and they played a lot of what we would call deep cuts, right? They played like, you know, Bowie, T-Rex, that sort of thing, but not even, you know, whatever would be the popular song on the radio. And so they weren't able to, and they were a three-piece band, and they weren't able to really book much in Weirton. And, you know, John was just getting really frustrated with, you know, why are we even doing this music thing if no one wants to listen to us? So he says to Rick, let's just go to New York and just see if we can make it, if we can get a deal. Having no idea what it took to get a deal or to make it or to even try to make it. They just got into a car and drove to New York. And at this point, so they get to New York, they don't know really how to proceed. They like are literally knocking on the door of record companies, just saying, "Hey, can we play for you?" And no one will even give them a listen. One of John Palumbo's roommates in college was the nephew of Jim. So the production company that Jim Croce had was Terry Cashman and Tommy West. Cashman and West was the name of the company. And Terry Cashman's nephew was John Palumbo's roommate. I'm sorry. Terry Cashman's business partner's nephew was John Palumbo's roommate. So there's this very tenuous connection. And John called his roommate and said, "Hey, aren't you the nephew of somebody that works with somebody producing Jim Croce?" And he's like, "Yeah, but my brother, my uncle doesn't work there anymore. He doesn't work with Cashman and West anymore." I said, "Well, can you still just try to get us like an interview or, you know, in front of him?" So the production company, Cashman West, had decided that they weren't going to do any they weren't looking for new acts. So they weren't taking any like interviews or rehearsal, you know, whatever you call it when a young artist tries to get in front of someone. And so when they called and tried to get in the door, they couldn't officially get in the door for a look, but the receptionist called Terry Minogue. Terry Minogue is the producer on the first Crack the Sky album, and he worked in the for the company, but as like a gopher, like you get coffee, and now he did have a music degree, but he wasn't doing anything in music really at that time. But he had some influence with the producers. So the receptionist said, "Hey, there's John and Ricky are downstairs, and they were referred by, I forget who the nephew's name is at the moment. They were referred by him, Gene. They were referred by Gene, and they're really nice boys. Do you think you can give them a listen? Well, since Terry wasn't supposed to do it, he said, okay, I'll do it, but tell them to come back on the weekend, and I'll just kind of like give them a listen, and at least so they feel like they were heard. I mean, Terry's a really nice guy. So this really is a low point because they do get to the office for the production company. It's Saturday, 4th of July, in the Chicago song. And it's 1,000,000 degrees outside, and Terry doesn't show up right away. So John and Rick are sitting there sweating. They've got their guitars, and they don't even know if they're going to get in front of it. Terry had been out. He came. He was late. He said, "Oh, guys, I'm really sorry." So he unlocks the door, opens the office, and John and Rick walk in, and it's just an empty office building. And they're like, "This is our, this is how. What is this?" And so they go in and they start playing guitars for Terry, and Terry's like nodding along, and he said he really was not impressed, and he even said to them, "Yeah, guys, it's nice, but it's really not working for me." And they said, "Well, you know what? We were playing you songs that we thought you would like, and what we want to know is we've got some other stuff that's kind of unusual, and can we just play it for you? Is there a piano? Is there a piano?" And Terry's like, "Yeah, there's one in the next room." So then John plays this. My phone went to sleep, so yeah, there we go.
Captain, he's got a wife at home and quite a few children. You can't let them live alone. Oh, I'll go down yelling or quiet if you like, but please spare the captain. You see, I've got no wife waiting. The song goes on for quite a while longer, but it's a sea epic. The song is called Sea Epic, and Terry's like, what? Sea epic? These two 20-year-old kids playing this very unusual song about the sea and captains and admirals, and there's a fat cook later on in the song. It turns out, this probably won't come up, so I'll tell you now. The song is ultimately about cannibalism, which is also very, very odd. But it caught Terry's attention. So then they went back to guitars. And they started playing some other guitar work that they had been working on. And Terry said it was like nothing he had ever heard before. He was completely hooked. He was infatuated with these two. Very unusual, very beautiful music. And he said, "Guys, I came here just to give you my ear, just so you felt like you were being heard. But I think this is amazing. And, I'm going to take it to Tommy and Terry and, help get you guys going." High point, right? Very good. 2 years go by and nothing. Terry Minogue cannot get Terry Cashman and Tommy West interested in the band. They're continually doing demos. They actually formed an acoustic duo and actually played around New York for a while. That wasn't working. They went back home. Terry said, look, form a band, flesh these songs out so that they're bigger and fuller. And they go back. They're continually working on demos. 2 years go by and nothing happens. Finally, Terry convinces Cashman and West to at least let them do a development deal, like not even a record contract. Just give them a little bit of money so they can go into a studio and actually produce a demo that's worthy of promotion. So they go to a now very prominent studio called Minot Sound in New York, but at the time it was just a tiny little place, and they start working on some demos, and while they're doing the demos, the owners of Minot Sound are like, I love this band, these guys are great, and so they offer Crack the Sky a deal, and Rick says, we might have signed it, we might have not have signed it. I don't even know what happened, but Cashman and West heard about Minot trying to sign the band, but the Cashman and West was paying for the time at Minot. So it was like the takeaway close, right? You know, now that somebody else is interested, now Cashman and West want to sign Crack the Sky. So there's a court case. They end up settling. I think Cashman and West had to pay Minot like $40,000 or $50,000 to let Crack the Sky off the hook, off the contract that they had signed with Minot, or maybe signed with Minot, and then sign with Cashman and West. So that was a bit of a low point, because they just wanted to play music, and now they're stuck in this lawsuit situation where they can't even record, and the guys are fighting it out. So they do sign with Cashman and West. Now Cashman and West decides they were a production company, and so they didn't produce. They produced Jim Croce, but they did not distribute. They weren't a record company. So they decided that they wanted a piece of that action too. They wanted to sell the albums also. And I should also mention, in the interim, Jim Croce died in a plane crash, so they didn't have their star either. So they needed someone to be big to produce, and they decided to create a record company to actually distribute. So this is Life Song Records, which is the label that signed Crack the Sky. So it's Crack the Sky's first album, but it's also Life Song's first album. So you've got this double kind of thing going on. Now, of course, the guys are ecstatic. This is a new high point right there in CBS Studios in New York. They record. They basically spared no expense for the first album. I think they said the recording was, now this is 1970. Well, they're recording it in 1974, 1975. But I think they said that it was about $60,000 or $70,000 for recording, which at the time was quite a bit. And they rented. There's a facility called The Church, which is an old church, and they rented a full orchestra to do all the orchestration in C Epic that you just heard a small clip from, and Ice and other songs on the first album, so they really had a lot of production quality on this first album, and it came out in late 1975. Rolling Stone, which Cleve read you a little bit from, was over the moon with this band. So, I mean, you can imagine a young band in 1975, and Rolling Stone calls it, one of the best debut albums of the year. You think, well, you've got it made. They called they said all these really nice things about John's songwriting and about the production quality. And I'm just going to play. I made you a little medley of 4 or 5 songs from the first album, so you can hear what those songs are like. Of course, my phone's asleep again.
Then you're doing fine, you know. You got an okay mind, you know. And I would hate to see you throw it away. You better hold on. Surf City, here come the sharks. Surf City, here come the sharks. I'm surfing, and the sea is under me. Surf City, here come the sharks. She's a dancer, and she sparkles and she shines. She's an attractor. Oh, she loves to wine and dine. Guess we need robots for running. A stainless steel group of chums. Robots for running. Girl, maybe an aluminum can. Will you stand by me against the cold night, or are you afraid of the ice? Afraid of the ice.
This was a real high point. The album is fantastic. As Cleve also mentioned, in 2015, Rolling Stone put it on the list of the one of the 50 best prog rock albums of all time. It was number 47, but not number 50. But that's a pretty big deal. I mean, in 2015, being 40 years after it came out. Yeah, 40 years after it came out, to be among the top 50 prog rock albums of all time. So they hit the road. They hit the road to support the first album. Now keep in mind, what did I say about Life Song? It was Crack the Sky's first album. It was Life Song's first album. They got a road manager who has seen the movie Spinal Tap. So at the end of Spinal Tap, the manager who plays the manager of the band, I'm forgetting his name, but he was modeled. It's in the end credits of the movie. He was modeled on, sorry, I'm forgetting names, but it was modeled on Crack the Sky's road manager during that period. The guy had seen it all, and he took Crack the Sky out to hit the road, and wanted them to feel some pain, wanted them to earn their way, wanted them to suffer a little bit, wanted to harden them. Now, they didn't feel like they needed to be hardened at all. I mean, the first album is amazing. Why do you need to go out and harden this band? Not to mention they had been playing music for the last, 3-4 years together. But that's what he decided. Took them to Canada, where obviously no one had heard of Crack the Sky anyway, but this was like an extra remove from any sort of possibility for them to be heard. And Life Song had no distribution. So the albums never made it to Canada, right? So they're up in Canada. They've got no promotion. There's no albums in record stores, and there's nobody playing them on the radio because Life Song doesn't know how to do proper promotion. They're just learning what it takes to run a record company. So they're up in Canada playing discotheques with sparkly balls and flashy floors. They're playing in dirty places and getting fruit and bread rolls thrown at them. It was not a happy time. Another low. They come back through Canada, and they're coming back down the eastern seaboard. Now, it wasn't much better in the States. they came back. They did some shows in New York. I think they went back to Pittsburgh, which is close to where they're from, and they come back to the East Coast, and Lifesong somehow managed to coordinate one location where record stores were where records were in the stores, where they had coordinated with two local radio stations, WAYE and WKTK here in Baltimore, to play their music, and the band was in town, all three at the same time. Now this is where the story gets really, really personal for me. They don't, the Baltimore show, does anybody know where this first Baltimore show was? No. Has anybody heard of Jacksonville, Maryland? There was a bar there, a small bar there called the Four Corners. And so it's a good 35 minutes from the city, right? So they're really not in Baltimore at all. And they're at this tiny little place in Jacksonville, Maryland called the Four Corners. And it just so happened that I lived about a half mile from the Four Corners. Now, I was 8 years old on the night of the show. So I definitely did not have that on my radar. But that's where it was. I was practically there. And this is the irony of irony. So when well, maybe it's not ironic, but it is coincidental. One of the artifacts that I collected during writing the book, the bass player, Joe Macri, had kept a date book from that first tour, most of which happened in 1976. And I said, "Oh, Joe, can you take pictures of all the pages so I can track out your whole first tour and where you went and cities and everything?" And there's the Four Corners show. Now, before I tell you this coincidental thing, let me tell you a little bit more about the show. So they show up a little bit late to the show. They drive up, and the opening band, who is a band called Sky King, and it's got two of Dave Brubeck's sons in the band, in Sky King. And they drive up, and the place is so small, there's no dressing room for bands. They literally had a trailer in the back of the club for the bands to change in. And so Dave Brubeck's sons are playing inside, and the guys are like, changing their clothes, and they're literally like standing around in the parking lot, just kind of waiting for them to finish. And they're listening to this band, and they're like, "Oh my God, they're so good. They're amazing. How are we going to follow these guys? The people inside are going to be so disappointed." And of course, they also didn't know, was it crowded? Was it not crowded? What was going on? And the band stops, and Joey D'Amico, who's the drummer, he told me, he was like, "I could hear like a few people like politely clapping, but there was no like hoorah and like, you guys are awesome." And they're like, if they don't like that band, they're really gonna have a hard time with us. So they go to the front door or the back door to enter, and they open the door, and it's like literally wall-to-wall people. They can't even get in the back door because it's crowded with people. And people turn and go, "There's Crack the Sky!" And they part, and they make a way to the stage, and they walk inside, and the guys in Crack the Sky are like, "What the hell is going on here?" They had never seen anything. And the crowd is going crazy, and somebody yells, "Rick Wachowski!" And Rick is like, "Wow, you know my name? What is this?" And they walk up, and they had not sound checked. They literally had just driven up, changed clothes, walk in. They had not sound checked, so they just had the plugs for their instruments. They plug in. Of course, the road crew had been there earlier to set everything up, and they start playing, and the crowd knows every single word of every single song that they're playing, for all the songs from the first album. And they're blown away. by the reaction. The crowd is just going. In fact, when they finished the show, the owner of the club said, "Hey, would you guys mind staying and doing another show?" They stayed for 3 more nights. So they did 4 sold-out shows at the Four Corners in Jacksonville. Now, here's the bit that I held back. It was on my birthday. So when I was researching this, and I look at Joe's planner for 1976, he's like, March 18th, you guys were like a half a mile from me on my birthday, and that was the breakthrough moment of the band. It was just very, very surreal to see that. All right, so that was a bit of a high. Now we got to go back to the low, right? So what happens after they? How am I doing? I'm doing okay. I got 10 minutes. What's the next low? The next low is nowhere else. No more do we have coordination where the record company has got books and records. They go to a signing, and in Spinal Tap they go to a record signing, and there's nobody, right? There's nobody there. They're like literally they go to a signing, and there are people there, but there's no records. So there's nothing for them to sign. They go to a show, like in Spinal Tap, they go to a show and they get lost in the back of the theater and don't know how to get to the front. They start going through all these different passageways. They open the door and they're looking at the back of the crowd, and the crowd's all waiting for them, and the band's like in back going, "Oh shit, what do we do?" So they have to find a way. All the things that could happen did happen, and the one thing that didn't happen was what happened in Baltimore. They didn't have any success, well, very, very little success for the rest of that tour. And it was plainly a problem with the label. So that was a bit of a low. So then they record the second album. The second album, I won't go into a whole lot. It's a great album. It's called Animal Notes. But unlike the first, I would say, there wasn't, so She's a Dancer was the single that was released on that album and played on a lot of radio stations. Ultimately, I think songs like Surf City and Ice ultimately became more popular, but She's a Dancer was the single. So this is back in the days where, they would pick a song and release it to the radio stations and promote it, and that would be the single. So She's a Dancer. On the second album, there really wasn't a clear single. They released called We Want Mine, which was a problem. It's a fine song. I don't think it works very well as a single, but we in Baltimore we played it. But part of the problem was there were a few lines that the record company interpreted as digs against the record company. There's a line. So the whole song is about wealth and how disparities in wealth and wanting to have a more egalitarian sort of wealth distribution. And there's a line in the song about how we ain't seen no silver since the plane crash last year. And people read that into like, the record company's not paying us ever since Jim Croce died in the plane. I mean, it really did have nothing to do with one another, but it did. It was a bit of a thorn in the side. Now, beyond that, though, the record company did take an ad out in Billboard magazine. They did promote the album. Albums were in stores. But again, this problem of not having a clear single was an issue. So that was a bit of a low. And then actually things get really low, because after the second album doesn't catch on, they start making plans for a third album, and they start really pushing John Palumbo. You got to write a single. You got to write a single. You got to write a single. And at some point, he just decided he was done. So he left. He left Crack the Sky before they started recording the third album. And he had written 3 or 4 songs for that album. And the guys had those songs. They had rehearsed them, but hadn't recorded any of them, and he quit. So now they've got to find a new singer, and they need 4 more songs, at least, for the album. And so so Terry Minogue produced the first album, produced the second album, and they decide, well, since John's gone, and since we need someone that can help out on songwriting, they pick a new producer. His name's Rob Stevens, great guy. But he helps them write a few more songs. Rick gets involved in the songwriting. Joe Magri gets involved in the songwriting. They all get involved in the songwriting. And they release the album Safety in Numbers, which is a great album. The first four Crack the Sky albums, but the first three really belong together from a kindred spirit sort of way. The first three are just absolutely amazing albums. If you're a fan of music, listen to them. After the third album, they kick off the tour. The tour is starting in Baltimore because they're big and they're still huge in Baltimore. The radio stations are playing all their songs, and they kick off the tour. They play at the Towson State Stadium, and it's I don't know how many tens of thousands of seats that they sell out. I think Foghat opened up for them, it was massive. And after the show, they go back to the hotel room, and even John Palumbo comes to the hotel room to party with them. So this is interesting, right? He's quit the band. He leaves them in a lurch, but he's still at least semi-supportive. He comes to the after party. First thing they do, they turn on the radio, and the first thing they hear when they turn on the radio is this. Which ironically was not the single from the album. What was the single? I think they released Long Nights. Long Nights. It's a slow, sad, very poignant song, but it's slow and sad. That was the single from the third album. This was Lighten Up McGraw. So Rick Wachowski turns on the radio. He's like, oh my God, we just played to 40,000 people. My song's on the radio. He's so excited. He jumps off the bed. He almost knocks himself out, hits himself on the ceiling. A real high point. I mean, they're feeling good. They're feeling really good. All right. There's many more high and low points, but I'm just gonna finish it up with this next low point and next high point. So they do the tour on the third album. Still doesn't catch on. They're still, each one charted slightly better in the Billboard Top 200. They never cracked the Top 100. So even this album got to like 120 something on the Billboard 200. And so they're scheduled to do a fourth album, and they literally, not symbolically, literally have made no money off any of the royalties because they had a cross-collateralized contract so that all the recording costs, all the touring costs, every single penny that the record company spent had to be recouped before they saw any money, including the weekly food stipend that they were getting, right? So they had to pay everything back. So they had literally made zero money. And one of the guitar players, Jim Griffiths, his girlfriend knew the lawyer for the Cars, and the Cars one of their popular albums had hit really big, and they had a really difficult contract with their record company. And the lawyer said, look, same thing happened to the Cars where they had a terrible contract. They went on strike, and the record company said, okay, we'll renegotiate your contract and get you a better deal. You guys should go on strike. So they go on strike, and Lifesong says, okay. Because they're all under contract, they can't even record. So they go on strike, The band breaks up, and none of them can do anything. John Palumbo can't. John Palumbo wants to make a solo album, and he can't without permission from Lifesong. Quite a low point. Final high point. I got 1 minute. Final high point is after the band is broken up, the rest of the guys go. They go back to Pittsburgh. They play, or Weirton. They go back and play in a band called B.E. Taylor Group. Most of them, all of them except Jim Griffiths play in B.E. Taylor. John Palumbo stays in the Baltimore area. Calls Rick one day and says, "I got some ideas for some new songs. Do you want to come?" Rick says, "Sure." He comes to Baltimore. John plays a few songs for him. Rick says, "Let's do it. Let's make an album." They both think that they're working on a John Palumbo solo album, but it turns out to be this album instead. Here's a little medley for you. Thank you. That's it.
So we have some time for your questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll call on you. And we also have some questions coming in from our audience that's watching online. So I'm going to start with an online question so that the folks in person here can start thinking. Let's go with this one first. Just because I queued it up, but because usually when I do that, no one raises their hand. But you please start.
Yeah, it's a great question because most people simply say, "Oh, Lifesong screwed up," right? That's the refrain that you hear, but it's not true. I mean, it's true that Lifesong screwed up, but we cannot blame Lifesong because, as you heard me mention, for the second album, they took out ads in Billboard magazine. They did promote the band. They did have the outreach, and I asked this question to everybody that I interviewed. I asked that same question: why didn't they make it? And one of the, I think, best answers is ego, because there was a lot of ego in that early band. John quitting during, after the second album really sealed their fate, probably. Even though white music was so big, it was only big in Baltimore. It didn't get any promotion outside. But the second album and the third album did get promotion. So, what is it? So you can say, well, he didn't write any singles. Playing Long Nights as a single is not representative of this band. So here's my theory. So the egos got in the way, killed it. It could have still happened if egos hadn't gotten in the way. But the reason the second and third albums didn't just blow up like the first album. So the first album has just amazing songs on it. And I think what happened is it germinated in the Baltimore area. That first album got into our blood. And so when we heard the second album and we heard the third album and when we heard the fourth album, we already had a soft spot because the plant had grown from that first album. Because that seed of whatever that first album's magic was, because that seed never got planted anywhere else, the growth that happened in us across the second and third and fourth album, the soil had already dried up. The plant wasn't allowed to grow. The sapling had been killed because of the lack of promotion on the first album. So does it all come down to promotional for something? No, I don't think so. Not exactly. But that's my theory. That's my theory, is that little seedling that got planted with that first album, and it was just here, that was enough for us to give all the other albums, lack of single, whatever, a chance and let it grow in the love and passion for the music for us. Because when you heard white music for the first time, that's when I was hearing it for the first time too, because 98 Rock formed in 1979. This album came out in 1980. Sarah Flesher, first female DJ on a major rock station in Baltimore, was a big fan of the band. And, they were playing all the songs you just heard me play in the medley. All of them were being played on the radio. And they were still playing Ice and Surf City and all these other songs. It was those songs that actually did it for me. That's what really clicked it for me. But you had this just a lot of breadth and depth of the music that we all gave it a chance that nowhere else did. So, I didn't repeat the question. I just realized.
Okay. So Tyson, one of our viewers asks, during your research, what did you learn about the music industry from that time that surprised you the most?
That surprised me the most. The music industry is just such an awful business. It is just such a difficult business that takes advantage of young people and passion. And I don't know that it surprised me, but the depth of how hard it is for artists in lots of different generations to make it, because not only so I'm not a music critic or a biographer. I'm a professor at Tyson, and I also work in IT professionally. So as a result of writing this book, which I did I wrote this book because I took my daughters to a Crack the Sky show and they loved it. And I was like, oh my God, you guys, they were 10 and 12 years old. They loved it. I looked up, I saw John Palumbo, he had back pain. And I was like, how much longer are these guys going to be up here doing this? This was about 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, their story needs to be told. And I told my wife and kids were at the table and I said, I'm going to go volunteer to write their biography. I was a English major, philosophy major in college, so I did have some writing, and I published in some magazines and whatnot, and some journals. I said, I'm going to go volunteer to write a book, and my girls were like, "No, Daddy, don't do it." They're like trying to hold me back. I was half, had a few beers, but I went up there, and the guys were fantastic. It took off, and so getting into it, I learned about the parody might be a strong word, about the record industry, but then I continued to research, and 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, doesn't matter. It's just such a tough gig, life to try to live, and anybody that does make it, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing anybody who makes it. So, yeah. Technique. Yeah. Yeah, and especially those first four albums. I mean, so to go back to the question about why didn't they make it, I think also, and this is being recorded. I don't want John to necessarily. He's not. He's not gonna. It's so funny. At one point, I said, "John, is listening to what your critics say difficult for you?" He goes, "No, because I never read anything written about me, so he's never going to hear this anyway." I think John Palumbo lost his edge, in his songwriting edge. I'm going to be honest. After White Music, including Greenhouse, I'm not much of a fan. I mean, I'm a fan in the sense that I love going to the shows. I love hearing the music. But if I'm going to pick something that I'm going to listen to, I'm going to pick something from White Music or before. And what makes White Music is such a weird thing, because you're right. It was Rick and John. That was it. John played the song. Rick played drums on it. So John sang and played bass. Rick played everything else. And Vinny DePaul, even though he's listed in the credits, he plays like a little bit of keyboard on like one or two songs. It's not much. John played the keyboards on the rest. It was John getting in touch with his pop side, right? Because it's nothing like the first three albums. It's John getting in touch with his pop side, but then after he got in touch with it, some inspirational creative spark, I think, went out. And when he talks about the albums that came directly, because there was an album in 1981 called Photo Flamingo, thank you. There was an album in 1983 called World in Motion. There was an album in 1984 called The End, because he left the band again. There was an album in 1986 called Raw, and there was an album in 1988 called From the Greenhouse. There was no shortage of songs out there, but except for Greenhouse, they're all pretty much forgotten from a radio perspective. And John will even say, when I interviewed him and when he's done other interviews, he goes, I don't even remember what songs were on those albums. Like, he doesn't remember even the act of really writing them. I mean, It's a little bit tongue in cheek. He does remember once you prod him and you play it for him, and you go, "Now do you remember?" He's like, "Oh yeah, now I remember." But 7:59, and so yeah, so and if you read the book at the very end, I corner him on this. I say, "John, when do you think your songwriting has changed over the years?" I wanted to get him to admit that the early stuff was like peak songwriting for him, and he said, "The stuff I'm writing right now is the best stuff I've ever written." And I push him a little bit on it, but he stands firm. And as an artist, he should. I mean, why go through the creative process if you don't believe in what you're doing? So it's a complicated question. Sorry we don't have more time, but thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the book.
Again, please help me thank Tyson Koska. Our book-selling partners, Snug Books, are outside. They'd love to sell you a copy of the book. Tyson would love for you to buy a copy of the book, and he'd love to sit around and talk a little more about Crack This Guy and sign it for you. So stick around. Tyson will sign your book. Thanks again for coming out.